Kendall Roy is a trans woman, and here's why. I started Succession in April 2023, and the first thing I ever tweeted about the show was, I don't know what a Kendall Roy is, but I know that estrogen could have saved her. Succession is a financial drama created by Jesse Armstrong and distributed by HBO. It's about the children of Logan Roy, a man who founded Waystar Royco, a media empire which spans news, entertainment, theme parks and cruises. The kids battle it out across 4 seasons to be the one to take over the business when their father retires. And to be clear, this video is going to contain spoilers for the entire series. It's also going to focus on the 3 main siblings. I'm sorry, Connor. You may be my president and the deliverer of some of my favorite lines.
I happen to be a billionaire. Sorry.
But this video is explicitly about the tussle for the crown, which you were never a serious contender for.
That's fine, because I don't need love. It's like a superpower.
The kids in Succession are not only fighting each other, they're also fighting against themselves. And something that comes up again and again and again in the show is the struggle they have with bodily autonomy and their own genders and sexualities. But these struggles, whether they're against misogyny, homophobia, or the act of sex itself, they're not just a source of B-plot drama. Their relationship to their bodies tells us a lot about their relationship to the business and capitalism at large. So I want to talk about the metaphor of capitalism being created through the gender politics of the Succession kids. And because I'm me, I want to get queer with it and discuss exactly how you can apply a trans lens to look at each of the Roy siblings. And before anyone tries to jump down my throat about trying to make the Roy siblings transgender, let me clarify that looking at the characters through a trans lens isn't the same thing as arguing that they were written as or meant to be seen as trans. I'm not going to give Jesse Armstrong that much credit. Doing a trans reading means applying some of the basics of gender theory, as well as interrogating these characters through a trans way of seeing the world to explore what new ways of understanding them and of seeing the show we might find. For example, most people have a basic grasp of the concept that gender is something we perform, rather than something we inherently are. Throughout this video essay, I'm going to analyse the way the Roy kids perform gender, situated in a trans understanding that people can have various levels of comfort and discomfort with how their gender is perceived and how it relates to their sense of self. Then I use that to see how it might help us understand the Roy sibs in a new way, as well as deepen our understanding of how gender and capitalism relate to each other in the show. Before I talk about the Roy siblings though, bear with me because I think it's important to talk about how Succession fits into the tapestry of television shows about men and finance. Succession is a kind of show that we now call prestige television. Prestige TV emerged at the turn of the millennium with not David Chase's The Sopranos in 1999, as many people miscredit, but Tom Fontana's Oz in 1997. These TV shows premiered on cable services, namely on HBO. Unlike networks, cable services weren't bound to strict content regulations, and neither did they have to write their episodes around ad breaks. Soon after their conception, they heralded a new era of television. Characters actually changed and developed over multiple seasons. Violence and sex were the norm, and social issues could be explored in all their gritty, ugly rawness. Most prestige TV is associated with HBO, which has made pretty much its entire fortune off of advertising itself as better than television, although HBO is hardly the only player in the prestige space anymore, and it's since moved away from the prestige branding. Although the term was introduced as a description of a particular era of high-quality television, some film academics, writers, and critics have argued that prestige TV has become its own genre of drama. In 2013, Vulture's Lucas Hill wrote the 13 rules for creating a prestige TV drama. According to Hill, all you need is a white middle-aged man with some kind of usually drug-related health problem and a traumatic past. He must struggle in a job or workplace that provides commentary on the failures of the American dream and capitalism, and it has to be set at a point in time where the world he knows appears to be dying out.
Tech is coming, we are over!
Throw in some health scares, a helping of family drama, a scattered dose of symbolism, and some subtle literary references, or not so subtle ones.
Just like in Hamlet. If that happens in Hamlet, I don't care.
and you have the bones of a prestige TV drama. This establishing of conventions is the first step in genreification. In the years since The Sopranos, prestige television has become the main way that we explore what it means to be a man in contemporary society on screen. That's because most prestige television shows are male-centered serials, which the book Cable Guys defines as a show that divides narrative time between the stories of the male protagonist's work and home lives and provides considerable explanation of their motivations, dilemmas, and underlying neuroses. Before anyone tries to tell me that Succession isn't a male-centered serial because there's a woman Roy sibling, let me just point out that so much of Shiv's storyline is dedicated to her relationship to Tom, who in turn is given more depth and nuance than any of the male characters' romantic or sexual interests. Much to all of our detriment, by the way. I would love to see the extended Succession cut that focuses on Tabitha Hayes, Rava Roy, and Gerri Kelman.
Say, what's up, boys?
Hi.
Cable Guy says that most male-centered serials focus on financial success as central to men's identities. In other words, being a man means making money, whether you're struggling to provide for your family or winning women over with your sharp suits and flash cars. This is especially relevant in Succession, which film scholar Anton Charpentier classifies as a financial drama. Financial dramas take the idea of money being at the heart of men's sense of self to extremes by intentionally blurring the lines between sex and business. Anyone who's watched Succession will be intimately aware of the way that they use sexual language when they're talking about doing business.
I'm about to eat dick for 3 hours straight.
But it's not just language. The show's main conflicts around business and gender are inseparable, and to give you an example, let's look at how the central conflicts of Succession are established through Kendall Roy. The central conflict of Succession is outlined in a confrontation between Kendall and Logan in the first episode. Kendall is the eldest son of Logan's second marriage, and he's expected to inherit the company. But on his 80th birthday, Logan decides he isn't going to retire as CEO, abandoning his plans to announce Kendall as his successor. Perplexed and infuriated, Kendall chases his father into the dining room to demand an explanation. He finds Logan leaning over a chair, comfortable but casually authoritarian, a patriarch at home in himself. Kendall, on the other hand, is unmoored. He's stiff, like the Ken doll image his name evokes. His clothes look not quite right on his body. He looks like he's playing dress-up. Logan says he lost confidence in Kendall after hearing he was trash-talked by Lawrence Yee, the owner of a brand Kendall is attempting to acquire. Kendall pushes back against his father's way of doing business, which leads to this.
I was being professional.
I hear it played weak. Conflict averse.
I wasn't about to get into a fucking big dick competition, okay?
I hear you bent for him.
What?
I hear you bent for him. And he fucked you.
Well, no, actually.
You know, I know that you've read a lot of books about business management and this and that, but you know what?
What?
Sometimes it is a big dick competition.
We're just over halfway into the first episode of Succession, and already it's pretty clear the relationship between sex and business. Charpentier argues in financial dramas, a man's manness is measured in his commitment to capitalism. We see that here. Because Kendall didn't have the capitalist drive necessary to screw Lawrence Yee out of Volta, Logan suggests he's queer, and like a bottom. Charpentier says that Logan represents an old-world tough guy version of capitalism, and he rejects the way the market is changing to prioritize neoliberal flexibility over masculine dominance. In season 1 and 2, Kendall's fluctuating loyalties between his stick-in-the-mud father and his venture capitalist and bisexual icon bestie Stewie reflect the way that he's stuck trying to embody old-world values, but also become the kind of increasingly flexible man who could thrive in the new neoliberal environment. This sense of being stuck between old world and new world sensibilities repeats in season 3. In the wake of the cruises scandal, in which Waystar is exposed in covering up the sexual abuse of its employees, Kendall kind of makes feminism his personality.
Fuck the patriarchy!
He once again tries to reject his father's patriarchal values by becoming a champion for women. It doesn't go great for him because he's incredibly misogynist. Kendall is representative of what Amanda D. Lotz in Cable Guys describes as the new masculine male, a more emotionally literate man who engages with professional women and rejects patriarchal standards.
But these incidents are symptomatic of a foundational sickness within our father and his company.
But who nonetheless upholds patriarchal values out of a fear of losing the power and relevance awarded to him by them.
It's only your teats that give you any value.
Throughout the show, Kendall is trying to manage his loyalties to the systems he operates in, just like he struggles to walk the tightrope between his dad's view of capitalism, which is all about fucking the enemy, and the slicker New World capitalism, which is all about fucking your bestie. I mean, operating smoothly and flexibly. He also struggles between the worlds of old world patriarchy and new world corporate feminism. The conflicts mirror each other, and this is one of the ways that Succession interweaves the dialogue of capitalism and gender in the show. Kendall has the most straightforward and simple trans reading of all the Roy siblings. See, for me, I think that Kendall's struggle in the show is deeper than just being stuck between two worlds and not knowing which one to fit into. A lot of the time, Kendall radiates the energy I spoke about earlier, of someone not quite fitting into his clothes, of trying to play the part, but having this sort of hollowness to him that makes it feel wrong. It's an energy that I can't help but read as trans femme. And I'm not the only person to pick up on these vibes either, by the way. In fact, the reason why I made the tweet that I referenced at the start of this video is because one of the first things that I ever encountered about Succession was an article by them, where authors ranked the Succession characters from least to most queer-coded. As Samantha Allen puts it, the fact that Kendall is constantly reinventing himself, but never becoming any happier, is giving major egg vibes. Michael Kuby, even while arguing that Kendall isn't queer-coded, reinforces this take in my mind by describing a bottomless pit of despair in Kendall that he's tried to fix the old-fashioned heteronormative way, marrying a woman, having children, being extremely rich, and clearly has not found a solution. While Abby Montiel speaks to Kendall's popularity with, and frequent comparison to, teenage girls, writing many of Kendall's own struggles, from crying at his carefully curated birthday party to being endlessly pushed aside for a position, are nonetheless relatable to the show's legions of young female fans. I have to agree, there's something about Kendall constantly finding ways to reinvent the kind of man that he wants to be, only to constantly relapse into an identity crisis when it doesn't work for some reason. That's very real. Kendall was groomed to be CEO from such a young age.
When I was 7, he sat me down at the Candy Kitchen in Bridgehampton, and he fucking promised it to me. 7 years old.
Essentially, I think you could argue that Kendall's entire struggle in the show is against the role he was assigned at birth. He just isn't that person, but he doesn't know what to be, if not that. Kendall, I know what you could be instead. A noise musician. Shiv faces a similar dilemma to Kendall in finding her place in the systems of patriarchy and capitalism. Throughout the show, but particularly in the first season, Shiv rejects her father's way of running Waystar Royco on ideological grounds, and is instead working in politics with Gil, a Bernie Sanders-like figure who wants to tax the rich and is ideologically opposed to her father. But her commitment to Gil's cause is complicated by the fact that Shiv still expects to be able to take full advantage of the privilege afforded to her by being a Roy.
His only daughter has come to work for me. What does that tell you about the man?
I'm not the fucking uncle.
Eventually, her dad promises her that she'll be the heir to Waystar, and that's all it takes for Shiv to abandon her so-called ideological opposition to her father and join the company. But throughout seasons 2 and 3, Shiv flips between claiming she's owed the privilege and status of becoming CEO,
Oh, for fuck's sake, Dad, just tell him it's gonna be me.
and denouncing any involvement with the company at all.
This isn't really my mess.
Shiv's attitudes towards feminism are equally problematic throughout the show. As the woman sibling, Shiv has never been given the opportunities to thrive in the business that her brothers have, and is constantly discredited and discounted despite being arguably the most functional sibling. At times, Shiv dismisses corporate feminism as gimmicky.
Suddenly this blows up and you want to jam it up my fucking uterus and smother it in estrogen? Please.
Moments later, she's quick to weaponize identity politics to serve her interests.
It can't be two men up there right now. It can't.
Charpentier argues that Shiv's fluctuating loyalties are reflective of a post-feminist crisis that many neoliberal white women are experiencing. Post-feminism is the phenomenon of privileged women who've gained many of their rights from the movement, rejecting it as cringe and beneath them in order to fit more seamlessly into the heteropatriarchal world. But privileged women have equally long benefited from the politics of oppression, and rejecting feminism also means rejecting an identity that's built around self-victimization. That's a bit less interesting to them. Hence this sort of conditional belief in feminism that's willed into existence when it suits. In order to protect her family at the Senate trial into sexual abuse at Waystar, Shiv intimidates a witness to stand down from testifying. As she explains to Rhea Jarrell, who is Waystar's very temporary CEO, while Logan steps down during the hearing,
if she speaks and she's compelling, then that's it for my family's company.
The famous feminist text, The Second Sex, speaks in great detail about the ways women choose to forfeit their womanhood to become rulers in the man's world. In that sense, in a neoliberal world, if men's manhood is measured by their commitment to capitalism, Shiv's commitment to capitalism is measured by her willingness to abandon not just other women, but her own womanhood. One of the ways we see Shiv scramble to abandon her womanhood is in her relationships. All of Shiv's relationships with the men in her life follow the same beats. When Shiv operates within the boundaries of being a good woman, being a listening and validating ear, smart in a sexy way but not in a threatening one, she quickly rises in the ranks. But eventually she hits the glass ceiling, where her ambition and business instinct takes on a more masculine, dominating aura that threatens the men in her life, and they quickly abandon her. This has resulted in a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy where Shiv, anticipating betrayal, never fully commits to the men that she's working with, and often works against them at the same time, which results in them having a convenient excuse to throw her to the side. One of the ways that Shiv attempts to get around the misogyny she faces at work is by essentially trying to use a man's body. Shiv is desperate to almost hijack Tom for access into the spaces she's prevented from. From early in the show, she sends him to do her bidding, even joking when he resists that,
Oh, hello? Is this the replicant department? Yeah, my meat puppet has stopped working.
Oh, Shiv.
But as time goes on, Shiv's increasingly seen as the man in her relationship with Tom, which makes him uncomfortable.
Like in terms of the org chart and my masculinity,
If you carve out from me, it undermines me.
But it undermines me if I look at the wall and the org chart suggests that you are being fucked in the ass by your wife.
Tom.
This manifests partly into his obsession with getting her pregnant in later Season 2 and Season 3, attempting to force Shiv back into her place by hijacking her body right back. Isn't love beautiful?
I love you, but you kill me and I kill you.
Shiv's resistant to pregnancy because she knows how it would change her dynamic with Tom and influence her place in the business, but that changes when she talks to her mother at the end of Season 3. In their conversation, Caroline asserts that
Some people just aren't made to be mothers.
despite all the ways that she attempts to distance herself from womanhood, the implication that Shiv is failing at being a woman obviously really hurts and deeply impacts her, and she immediately decides to rectify this by having Tom's baby. Sort of.
Yeah, we should freeze at least.
See, for Roman and Kendall, in order to succeed at the business, they'd also have to succeed at being men. For Shiv, though, succeeding at being a woman necessarily disqualifies her from being CEO from the same capitalist standards. She can't be both a woman and the CEO of a business. Look at the way she has to dismiss her maternal instinct in order to convince Matsson that being pregnant shouldn't disqualify her from being CEO.
Is that true?
Yeah, well, she's one of those hard bitches, right? Who's gonna do, 36 hours of maternity leave, emailing through her vanity cesarean? Poor kid will never see her.
She has to pick, but she struggles to decide because, as Tom says in the final episode, when she suggests they attempt to patch together their relationship,
You don't like to fail a test, do you, Siobhan?
Kendall and Shiv are both trying to find their place in capitalism and the patriarchy in a rapidly shifting social environment. But despite their queer subtext, their relationships to their sex and gender are relatively normative, which is important. Despite the disadvantages she faces, Shiv is frequently acknowledged as a professional and intelligent person. She and Ken are both referred to in the script as the higher status siblings. This is partially because their bodies can more seamlessly fit into the heteronormative, capitalist standards of their world. So let's turn to the Roy sibling who struggles not just to find his place in systems of capitalism and the patriarchy, but struggles to fit into these systems as a whole. Things start to get more interesting when we talk about youngest Roy boy Roman, because he operates from somewhat of an outsider point of view to the systems that rule his siblings' lives. While they're each trying to determine their place in feminism, each at different times positioning themselves as experts and leaders who know what women want, Roman has no interest in pretending he knows anything about it.
Is this one of those things I need a woman to explain to me why it's bad?
In a way, this is what allows Roman to be the most self-aware and honest of all the Roy siblings.
It's our time.
Oh, you mean us? This multi-ethnic transgender alliance of 20-something dreamers we got right here?
But it also makes him a particularly interesting character to analyze when it comes to how gender and capitalism are represented in the show. Roman's arc in Succession explicitly deals with his opposition to his own body in relation to gender and sex. He's the runt of the Roy litter.
You hit me, I will fuck you up. Right? Ah, fuck.
Yeah. He's shorter than his siblings and feminine in both his appearance and mannerisms, a fact which disqualifies him from his father's favour.
So what is it, son? Are you scared of pussy?
He also struggles to maintain a heterosexual relationship and is revealed to be unable to have sex or even stomach the thought of sexual intimacy.
I am so wet for you right now.
That's not... you don't have to be so specific.
In the first episode of the show, Roman paints himself as incompatible with Waystar.
I'm just so pleased to be out of here. This place was essentially a cage to me.
But, lured in by the promise of gaining his father's approval, by the beginning of season 2, he begins to actively attempt to become a better businessman. One way he does this is through forming a business mentorship and sexual relationship with his father's general counsel, Gerri. In mid-season 2, Gerri lines up a chance for Roman to prove his business acumen by securing a deal with Edward Asgarov, a rich investor who has the money to take Waystar private and save it from a hostile takeover. And Roman does get in conversation with Edward, cooking up a deal with him in the male bathrooms that night. That'll be important later, but for now, speaking just after the deal is done, Roman outlines a business proposal to Gerri.
Well, just floating, is there an angle here for a team up? Like me, kind of a Jagger Tarzan, fronting things up and swinging through trees with my little dick, singing and killing shit, and you back home cooking us soup and making sure the numbers are right. Huh? Rockstar and the mole woman?
Wow, you're really selling me.
But it would be chair and CEO. Or CEO and chair. And you will get properly fuck you. I don't even care about climate change. I'm in New Zealand with my own private army rich. Not like some pathetic asshole beach house on the vineyard rich.
Unable to identify or convey how he truly feels about things, Roman tends to devolve into sort of mindless, half-ironic word dribble to express or conceal complex emotions.
Fucking cars, buildings, everywhere.
But it can reveal a lot about his inner machinations, and that's why the way he defines their relationship here is important to me. Throughout the entire show, Kendall and Shiv are fighting to eventually master the systems they operate in by becoming CEO. But here, Roman implies he doesn't really care whether he's CEO or chair. He cares that if he wins, the battle will be over, and he can stop fighting. In the thesis, The Transformation of Masculinity in Late Capitalism, Narratives of Legitimation and Hollywood Cinema, Tom Harmon analyzes a shift in the stories we tell about men's place in capitalism and heterosexuality. In the films of classic Hollywood, the narratives around men had them engaging in capitalism essentially to become better prospective spouses, provide for their wife and children, or be an active member of society. In other words, their motivation for being better workers was service to others. But post-neoliberalism, and in the era of late-stage capitalism, Harmon argues that narratives around men in capitalism now tell stories of men in service to themselves. He argues that men are constantly in a process of forcing themselves to become better capitalists in order to better their own future outcomes. Basically, if they force themselves to be good enough capitalists now, maybe they'll eventually be able to retire and not have to worry about working anymore. I think Roman can be understood as a man who doesn't fit naturally into the systems that his siblings do, but who's beginning to feel at this point in the series that if he just invests his body into the capitalist machine hard enough, he might eventually be able to break through to the other side of it, win his dad's approval, and stop having to function according to the rules of the game. These feelings in Roman get stronger as he becomes more confident in his business abilities. A few episodes later, Gerri encourages him to push once again with Edward. As he walks out the door, Roman comes out with a proposal of another kind.
One more thing, real quick. Should we get married?
What?
You know, not that. Like an equivalent of a thing. Like I abduct you and force you to live with me.
That's not equivalent.
Well, then you kill me. You chop my dick off. You know, something. I'm kidding. But you know what I'm saying. You eat me, I eat you. Like they do in Germany. Anyway, a lot to think about. I get it. So let it... Bye.
See, I think when Roman talks about kidnapping, mutilation, and torture as equivalent to being in a straight relationship, he's suggesting that, just like with capitalism, he'd have to force his body against its nature to participate in normative heterosexuality. The two systems are intertwined. Remember again Charpentier's thesis that men measure their sense of manhood by how committed to capitalism they are. I think Roman's making those calculations here. He's feeling like if he's beginning to have success in forcing himself to be a good businessman against his nature, he might also be able to force himself to be a more heteronormative man, even if it doesn't feel natural to him. In other words, his body and the images he paints of it mirror his shifting feelings around forcing himself to fit into the capitalist environment. Also, before anyone accuses me of being anti-Roman, Gerri, let me just say straight out that I don't know if there's anything more romantic than a man saying that he can barely stand the thought of heterosexuality, but he'd endure it for you. But putting weird declarations of love aside, one of the reasons the Roman-Gerri situationship falls apart is because Roman is learning the wrong lesson from his mentorship with Gerri. She isn't trying to teach him to eventually force his way through his gender weirdness to become a dominating capitalist man like his father. Instead, she sees the value of his more flexible nature in a fluid economic environment. As Gerri tells Roman to push with Edward, he paces around the room, lifting a rose out of a vase and then tucking it into his shirt. She asks him,
"Could you seduce?"
This is one of, if not the only time that feminine, non-violent sexual language is used in a positive way to refer to a man doing business in succession. And it's true that Roman seduced Edward at Alcestis. I mean, this is just flirting.
Are you kidding me? You're like fucking Warhol of, you know,
You know where I'm from?
Stanford?
Yeah.
I mean, originally, no I don't. I do not know where you come from, and you know what? I'm embarrassed about it. I would like to know.
Roman's rendezvous with Edward is the first of 3 such seductions, all of them in men's bathrooms. See, I said that'd be important later. The second is in the middle of season 3 with Jared Mencken, the fascist Republican presidential candidate, in the bathroom in his dad's hotel room. The third is with Lucas Matson an episode later, season 3, episode 7, in the men's room at Kendall's 40th birthday party. It's this third seduction that piques my interest, and Shiv's. For the next part of the analysis, I want to give a shout out to Caitlin, Tumblr user Native Hue of Resolution, whose analysis of the gender politics between Roman and Shiv I build on heavily. She also has a slightly different take on the dynamic between the siblings, especially Ken and Shiv, that's definitely worth a read. Roman and Shiv have the closest relationship of any of the siblings, to the point where the creators say that they didn't even technically decide which one of them is older. There's even a theory that they're twins, backed up entirely on this joke that Roman makes in season 1.
I'm thankful that I was not born a Siamese twin.
I'm also thankful for that.
Their closeness is mainly possible due to mutually assured destruction. Roman and Shiv don't benefit from the legitimizing status of being the eldest boy, and thus the obvious option for successor, meaning they're on more equal ground with each other than they are with Kendall. But more importantly, they also both have bodies that transgress the patriarchal norms of their world, so they can weaponize the politics of sex and gender to keep each other in check. As Roman learns how to use his femininity to his own advantage, the power balance between them begins to shift in his favour. By seducing men in the male bathrooms, Roman has effectively been able to take what should by rights be Shiv's role as a woman, and he does it in a space that she can't access. By securing these relationships, he becomes a higher value candidate for successor in the eyes of their dad. Political views aside, Shiv is visibly disturbed by Roman's closeness to Mencken, and by the time he seduces Matsson, Shiv discovers that Roman's been strategizing with their dad without her in the room. She starts to feel honestly threatened by her brother, maybe for the first time, and this leads to a confrontation at Kendall's party. In this scene, Shiv is trying to get Roman to let her into the deal he's brokered with Matsson. He counters by taunting her about her strained relationship to Tom, who's just found out he won't be going to jail.
You're having a very bad day. I know that. But with hearing that you have to continue to share your apartment with the old meat wardrobe, but, try to keep your wig on, yeah?
I'm the one in a functioning relationship.
Sure you are. I saw you, I saw you sipping Dad's champagne, looking like you were sucking a lemon.
I don't drink on work days because I have self-control.
Okay, that's what that is. Okay, I thought maybe you were thinking about all the dick you were gonna ride when he was inside.
Fucking God. You know what? No one likes talking about me fucking guys as much as you do. Do you know that? Why is that? Is that because you're the COO who can't fuck?
Did you think Tom was going to jail? Did
No,
you?
I'm happy he's
Did you?
not
Did
going
you?
to jail.
Oh, I'm sure you are. You look really happy. Did you think he was, though? Maybe? There's a chance he was going to jail. Maybe Dad was going to go to jail. Fuck, maybe I was going to go to jail. And because Kendall's... that it was all about you. You thought it was ladies' night and they were playing your song, but guess what? You were wrong. All the men got together in Man Club and we decided, sweetheart, everything's fine, so just...
In the start of this scene, Roman glows with a new sort of sexual self-confidence following his seduction of Matsson. His body language and clothing is loose and comfortably feminine, probably more so than we've really seen from him in public before. He taunts Shiv for having to stay in a monogamous relationship. See, while she's restrained by the pressures of heteronormativity, finally it's him who's been able to sleep around. Calling him the COO who can't fuck puts him back in his place as the sexually dysfunctional sibling, suggesting his inability to be a real man reflects inadequacy at his job. This hits close enough at home for Roman to be explicit, confirming her fears that the men are cutting her out. Because Roman, as a gender non-conforming man, is impacted by the patriarchy in a way that Kendall isn't, he has a self-awareness of the gender politics between him and Shiv that he constantly throws in her face in this way.
I mean, I was gonna mansplain it to you, but I think he did a very good job.
Charpentier argues the use of gendered language is a mechanism of patriarchal control that secures the dominance of traditional heterosexual masculinity and maintains the submissiveness of femininity. When Roman exercises this practice, he's attempting to maintain that same control. However, unlike his predecessors, he's a failed heterosexual by these oppressive terms. Roman clings to using misogynistic language against his sister because the only thing that he really has against her is that he's Logan's son, but this isn't as effective as it could be because he also fails at living up to those oppressive standards. We see this again just an episode later when Roman's relationship to Gerri is, for lack of a better term, exposed. Logan is furious, not just because Roman was sending pictures of his cock and presumably balls to a woman that he's known since he was in nappies. The script itself says Logan wouldn't mind if Roman was just sexually harassing Gerri for a joke. But if he was serious and there's something femdommy going on, that's just as sissy as being queer in Logan's eyes. Seeing the chance to get the upper hand over Roman, Shiv immediately takes the chance to seemingly reveal to their dad that it's rumored Roman has had sexual interactions with men.
There's issues, Everyone says that he used to get jerked off by his personal trainer.
Shiv constantly makes reference to Roman's failed sexuality when she needs leverage over him.
Someday, you're actually gonna have to fuck something.
Fuck you,
Rome.
bitch.
And she uses their dad's disapproval of his sexuality to manipulate Roman to her side.
Dad is never gonna choose you because he thinks there's something wrong with you.
But as Caitlin writes in her incredible analysis of the gender politics between the kids, although Roman's queerness is a vulnerability for Shiv to exploit, it's also interesting to note her success with this tactic is limited. Logan is furious with Roman after Dick Pic Gate, but he still brushes Shiv off after she outs him. Roman's queerness may disqualify him, but it doesn't change the fact that Shiv is a woman and so was never a real option to start with. When Roman is bragging about being the current favourite child at Kendall's party, he tells Shiv,
He loves fucking me and he just doesn't want to fuck you anymore.
As stomach-turning as this language is, it again frames the battle that unfolds between them in the show as one that has them explicitly utilising the politics around their bodies to become the most seductive second choice for their father by being the sibling to best adapt their transgressive body to the business world. During their argument, Shiv points out an aspect of their relationship that I find challenging, namely Roman's obsession with her sex life. It pervades their relationship. I mean, their first interaction on screen is Roman implying that Shiv wishes he would date rape her.
Yeah, you wish.
You wish?
While initially appearing to be an extension of Roman's shock factor humour, I think there's something deeper going on here. In the wake of facing two of the most devastating humiliations/betrayals at the hands of people he loves back to back in the last episodes of season 3, Roman hardens up in season 4. He comes back with this new butch haircut and kind of a more masculine aura. After Logan's death, this increases tenfold. He essentially experiences a sort of transition, deciding he's outmanned his grief. He grows out his facial hair a little, loses many of his feminine mannerisms, and dresses in less slim-fitting shirts. I don't like to rely hugely on deleted scenes since we don't know what kind of tone this would have had in the show or whether the writers deleted it because they felt it wasn't true to the character, but it's also important to note that during this point in the series, there are deleted scenes where Roman attempts to force himself to have sex with Tabitha and then brags to Gerri that he's overcome his intimacy issues. What isn't deleted is that he demands that she recognize him as a real man, and when she tries to remind him that he isn't, and that's okay, he subjects her to the kind of patriarchal violence he's never really been able to wield before by firing her on the spot. A quick note on this scene. The second sex argues that in our capitalist society, the only way that women can have identities that are not defined by their relationship to men is by excelling at their career. It also argues that as women get older and lose their childbearing ability, they're seen as less of a woman by society. But Roman's somewhat relentless sexual attraction to Gerri, regardless of her age, affirms her womanhood, while his constant focus on and defending of her professional abilities reinforces her identity as a whole person, not just as a subject of male desire. As much as Gerri was Roman's safe space from having to conform to patriarchal standards, Roman was Gerri's safe space from patriarchal violence, and that's one of the reasons why him telling her she's not any good at her job is particularly cruel and hurtful in this scene. Funnily enough, that's the same episode where we see the only solid moment after Connor's wedding, where there's a flicker of his old self. It's just after he's chickened out of presenting Waystar's ambitious new Living Plus program on stage alongside Kendall. I think it's interesting that we see this wobble in Roman's newfound masculinity coincide with a wobble in his confidence in his business decisions. Roman literally makes the decision to drop out of the presentation after Kendall says,
Hey, dude, it's enough to make you lose your faith in capitalism.
At the end of the day, Kendall's faith in capitalism is unwavering, and he knocks the presentation out of the park. Later, Kendall taunts his brother about his failure to perform. But it's not Roman's business indecision that he makes fun of, but his masculinity when he sends him this haunting, digitally manipulated video of their dead father.
I want to make what I think is a fairly historic announcement. I'm convinced that Roman Roy has a micro dick and always gets it wrong. I want to make what I think is a fairly historic announcement. I'm convinced that Roman Roy has a micro dick and always gets it wrong. I want to make what I think is a fairly historic announcement. I'm convinced that Roman Roy has a micro dick and always gets it wrong. I want to make what I think is a fairly historic announcement.
It's partially the crisis of self that this video evokes in him that sets the stage for America Decides, an episode where Roman demonstrates an unwavering, manic dedication to manipulating the entire American Republic in order to make a night of good TV, and when the sexual language he uses, for kind of the first time, makes its way out of the zone of weird and off-putting and into the realm of just rapey.
And the country's just a big pussy waiting to get fucked.
And remember what I said before about Roman's misogynistic jabs at Shiv never really landing fully because he's a failed man himself?
This is about the future of the country.
No, I think it's because you broke up with your boyfriend.
Jesus, you're a prick.
In season 4, we see Roman take this idea that he can just force himself into meeting heteronormative and capitalist standards to extremes, and to his credit, it's during this point in the show that the possibility of him becoming CEO is the most real. He has this dominating force about him that other men finally recognize. If he can just keep it up, it might work out for him. But of course, it's not to be. The social credit Roman's built up is wasted when he breaks down at his dad's funeral, unable to maintain that masculine image of himself and subsequently reverting back to his puppy dog ways. It's after this breakdown, with Roman slowly coming to terms with the knowledge that he's been defeated by his own body, that Kendall finds him. Worried that Shiv is making a deal with Matsson to cut the two of them out of the business, he's trying to recruit Roman's help. But Roman's distracted, staring across the room at his sister, who he found out earlier that day is pregnant.
Look at her. And her fucking pomp. She's fucking glowing. All dope, one in the chamber.
The thing is, unlike Roman, Shiv's been able to make her body work exactly as it should. By securing Matsson's support, she's won back her role as seductress. Plus, she's fulfilled the expectations of her gender by becoming pregnant. I think Roman's intensely jealous that, in his view, Shiv succeeds at her gender. But also particularly, I think he's jealous that Shiv is succeeding if she's feminine and seduces men, but he's failing if he does the same. For a man who finds the idea of getting a woman pregnant nauseating, and who operates more comfortably in the world when he's making queer little moves with other guys,
God, you smell like cotton candy. I almost want to lick your neck.
I think Roman harbors a subconscious desire to have a body that would work in a more bearable way. This is further backed up, in my opinion, by a deleted scene in the finale where Roman expresses intense curiosity about what it's like to feel pregnant. Again, we can't tell the tone here, but the seemingly genuine interest he shows and Shiv's response to it stands out to me as weird behaviour from a cis man.
Even Roman's reaction to Shiv's pregnancy in what is, I will shamefully admit, in my opinion, one of the funniest scenes, betrays a desire to be involved in her pregnancy in some way.
Actually, I'm pregnant. There you go.
Is it mine?
Yeah, uh-huh.
Really?
You know how disgusting you are?
Do you love it?
No.
Should we bone again?
No.
Kid number 2?
Guys.
I don't think that Roman harbors any secret incestual desire for his sister. Please, let's put that on the record. But I do think that making these jokes is a way to express a whole host of complicated feelings about his gender that he probably doesn't even consciously register.
Roman and Shiv have this fascinating inverse relationship to their genders, where they've both been born in the wrong body to do business and sex the way that they'd like to. Whereas Roman is more comfortable being feminine and finds the idea of being forced to be a man in business unnatural and even torturous, Shiv is far more at home taking on a man's role, and it's being reduced to a mother and wife that's the nightmare scenario for her.
While Roman attempts to force his body to work the way it's expected to, his desire for an alternative to the pressures of being a heteronormative man mirrors the desire he has to be free from the pressures of Waystar, one he expresses right back in the first episode, and that Kendall identifies in the last, when he tells Shiv.
He doesn't want it, but he can't say it.
We're veering into headcanon territory here, and I want to take a moment to acknowledge that they're not actually twins. But to indulge myself, I like to think that sometimes Roman wishes he were the girl twin, and Shiv, the boy twin. But pregnancy, or fertility in general, has a broader purpose in Succession.
In the series finale, the siblings have one final argument over which of them deserves to be CEO. Kendall attempts to convince his siblings of his business acumen, but when neither of them fold, he loses his temper and appeals to patriarchal values.
I'm the eldest boy! I am the eldest boy!
You're not.
And you know, it mattered to him. He wanted this to go on.
Well, I mean, she's the bloodline, though.
What? I'm the bloodline. We're all the fucking
No,
bloodline.
I just mean if you're gonna play that card, Dad's view was yours weren't real.
This is how it's revealed to the audience what they may have suspected the entire time. Kendall's infertile.
Despite all the ways he's changed and everything he's been through, the bookends of the series prove the same thing of Kendall Roy. Just because he has all the right parts doesn't mean he has the spark to give them life. In his ambition to take over the business, he has the degree, the experience, the smarts, but not the killer instinct that could make him a good CEO. In his desire to carry on the family line, he has the masculine persona, the sexually functioning male body, the heterosexual relationship, but ultimately cannot produce children. In fact, just as none of the 3 kids can carry on in the business, none of the 3 kids can carry on the family line. Kendall because he's infertile, Roman because of his inability to overcome his sex aversion, and Shiv because she's been reduced to Tom's wife. No matter how rich they are or how much they all want it, the physical reality of their bodies has ultimately betrayed them.
The downfall of the Roy family by the siblings' own bodies is a metaphor for late-stage capitalism. When you have infinite wealth and near infinite access to resources, there's theoretically nothing that stops you from growing and growing forever, except for the physical reality that the world's resources are finite, and eventually you'll simply exhaust them. So what can we say about the character who actually does succeed in this show? Tom Wambsgans is a fascinating man who should be dissected by science. He's also, in my opinion, the only character in the show who actually does transition. In season 1 and season 2, Tom's a bumbling baby girl of a man who, even at his most masculine, is pretty femme. It's not just his voice, his expressions, his fussiness, or his grooming, it's also about the language that he uses to describe himself. In season 2, episode 7, when he's being interrogated over his place in covering up systematic sexual assault at Waystar's Cruises division, Tom stalls for time by saying he has to go to the bathroom. But he says it like this.
I've got this pathetically weak bladder. I'm like an old woman who's had a baby somehow.
It's not the only time that Tom compares himself to a woman or is placed with women in the show. Actually, it kinda happens all the time.
Bad news about my hymen. Yo, it's gone.
There's also these deleted lines. It's also something that Roman notices about Tom, which I think makes sense because of how conscious Roman is of his own failed manhood. In season 3, episode 9, Roman taunts Tom about Shiv's reluctancy to get pregnant.
Yeah, you know why she's making you wait, right? She's gonna make you carry it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Very funny.
You're gonna have to poop out your own baby and then squeeze your little Tommy tits for man milk.
But as Tom sneaks up the ranks, the way he starts to carry himself and talk about himself changes. By the end of the show, when Matsson is making the decision about who he's going to endorse as CEO, he explicitly chooses Tom over Shiv because...
So then I was thinking, well, if I can have fucking anyone in the world, why don't I get the guy who put the baby inside her instead of the baby lady?
He's sort of completed the transition that Roman failed, having gone from the old woman who's had a baby to the man who put a baby inside a woman. Jesse Armstrong has this theory that none of the characters in Succession really change, which is something that I'd actually disagree with, but it's true that they haven't changed enough to overcome the systems that they've been pitted against. At the end of the show, I think Tom wins ultimately because he's the only character who actually is able to complete a kind of transition. If the siblings' failure at the hands of their own bodies could be understood as a metaphor for late-stage capitalism coming to a careening end, Tom represents the new world that's coming to replace it. Who knows what that world looks like? We certainly don't. The show ends before we get to find out. But look, I don't think it's suggesting that there's going to be a communist revolution anytime soon. Sex and gender is only one of the ways that the themes of bodily autonomy and control emerge in Succession. I'm gonna do everyone a favour and leave the dog motif alone before foam starts coming out of my ears, but any self-respecting Roman Royist will tell you that food is a huge part of the Roy siblings' lives. Each of the Roy siblings, in turn, are implied to have eating disorders, or at the very least, to view eating as unbecoming, especially Roman and Kendall, with Kieran having spoken in interviews about his belief Roman has an eating disorder, and cut lines from draft scripts referring to Kendall relapsing with anorexia in season 3. In May 2023, Tajal Rao wrote an article for the New York Times called "On HBO's Succession, If You're Eating, You're Losing." It details some of the ways that food is used, most often by Logan, to wield power over his kids.
What the fuck?
Dad has sent some perfectly innocent and I'm sure safe to eat donuts.
By laying out a banquet that nobody's expected to eat.
You beat Roman with a fucking slipper and Gustav chilly cried for ordering lobster, remember? And Kendall tries to kill you in his 5 minutes out in the cold?
Well, it's not polite to order the most expensive item on the menu when you're not paying.
Or by using the act of eating to humiliate insubordinates.
The last piggy to eat a sausage is the mole.
I'm not going to harp on about it, but I do want to point out something that occurred to me while I was researching for this essay. In Which Side Are You On?, Succession's 6th episode, Logan invites Kendall to have dinner with him. Kendall arrives to find his dad has ordered him a cheeseburger. He tells him to eat it, and we watch as Kendall struggles to put the food in his mouth. There's a really intimate and powerful mind game being played out here. On one hand, Logan often lords it over his children that he worked his way up, tooth and nail, from lower class beginnings, and as such, he both sharpened his killer instinct and has more of an understanding of what the average man really wants. Kendall's inability to stomach average person food shows he's soft, cushioned by his upbringing, but it's also not unlinked to gender. I mean, it's not hard to imagine Logan as viewing eating disorders as a girly, queer trait. But on the other hand, to eat the cheeseburger is to give in to an uncouth and primal, animalistic, poor person desire. In a simple act, Logan demonstrates to Kendall just how far out of his depth he is, how clueless and powerless he feels when faced with one of the simplest things in the world, eating a cheeseburger. Okay, what has this got to do with anything? Well, nothing, except for that it makes me think of Tom Wambsgans. Rao writes that Tom, as the lower-class infiltrator into the Roy family, whose one is placed by studying and mimicking their habits, is hyper-aware of the intricacies of upper-class weirdness about food.
And she's wolfing all the canapes like a famished warthog.
But his mimicry isn't perfect. Rao also speaks of the times Tom is caught with his mouth open, so to speak.
I mean, I'm sick with grief.
Oh, you're sick with grief? You might want to put down that fish taco. You're getting your melancholy everywhere.
But one scene that Rao doesn't mention in reference to Tom is arguably the most interesting.
Hey. You okay, Tom? What the fuck?
Thank you, Logan.
Tom?
Thank you for the chicken.
I mean, it's played for laughs and it's undeniably a hilarious scene in the show, but it's also, like, the boldest that any person is to Logan in 4 seasons. The Roycests, who've spent the majority of their adult lives building up the confidence to stand up to their dad, all shrink in his presence. Tom, faced with having to sacrifice himself to Logan's cause, finds himself instead almost possessed, putting on a brazened and vulgar display of primal human instinct. In an environment where everyone is expected to be able to control their desire to eat food, Tom's inability to control himself sort of weirdly becomes a way he rises above the mindfuckery of Roy bullshit and asserts his own dominance in the space. This makes food a second way that Tom is able to do what the Roy siblings can't, and actually take control of a situation through his body. Bodies, the way we see them and the way they are described, are a huge part of the film and television experience. When casting roles, agents don't just pick actors based on who delivers the lines best. They're listening to the sound of their voice, watching their body language, and imagining how that body might exist in relation to others on screen. The imagery of bodies, and especially in relation to gender and sex, is used constantly in Succession, painting pictures of genders and sexualities that are inherently tied to success, failure, and even lateral shifts in the rapidly evolving business world that the characters live in. As the 3 main contenders for the Waystar crown, Kendall, Shiv, and Roman themselves are products offered up for the appraisal of the Waystar shareholders. The constant re-emergence, re-imaging and redefining of their relationships to their bodies and each other's mirrors their constantly shifting relationships to business and capitalism as a whole. The Roy siblings grow up around essentially infinite wealth and access to resources, but they're thwarted by the physical reality of their bodies and the unsustainability of what they aim to achieve with them. In the same way, Succession questions the viability of our society under late-stage capitalism, which demands constant growth and domination in ways that greedily outstrip our physical resources. There we go. I bet you thought that this would never end, and I'm sorry for luring you all in with a promise about talking about which Roy sibling was going to end up on estrogen first, and then ending up talking about capitalism a whole bunch. I'm also sick, so I'm really sorry for the way that my voice sounds at the end of this, but this video essay has been the result of months of research, writing, filming, refilming, rewriting, and editing. While filming it, I've broken my laptop, messed up my phone, smashed my camera, and almost quit a million times. I'd like to thank my housemates, Anushka and Argo, for being there for me from when this video was just scribbles on a page and my ravings, and also for buying me a ring light for my birthday. That was really sweet. Thank you to my friends Jen and Lachlan for having to hear me complain about this thing for like 6 months and being subjected to far too many clips, and in Lachlan's case, the entire show from start to finish. Thank you to my beta watchers who had a look at this video when it was done and found out all the little bits and errors that I had missed, and of course to my Twitter oomphs. I'd also like to thank all the writers, academics and fans who I referenced throughout the video, as well as being cited throughout. There's a link in the bio to a reference list, and the link also includes credit and links for some of the art on my wall behind me. Thank you so much, and I will see you the next time I have far too many thoughts about silly TV shows.